Warning: if you have already mastered the Barbarian, this video will be relatively irrelevant for you.
Welcome, welcome. This is going to be my Barbarian masterclass. Yes, it's going to be a masterclass, I swear. So, before we get started, there's one thing I want to tell you. One thing I'm 100% sure about. So, Barbarian, believe it or not, Barbarian is going to do a little bit more than 17 damage. That's true. Barbarian is going to do a little bit more than 17 damage. I know, it can't be a masterclass because it's just a level 25 beta. I know. But in that context, we are not gonna talk about builds because, let's be honest, anything can change and we still don't know anything about the late game. So what we're gonna talk about is the stuff that is probably not going to change and what is going to be the foundation of the Barbarian class. And some tips from the beta to help you get started when the game launches. So I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, I'm not the biggest blaster out there. There were people who had like 10 times my bank and they had like all characters with tier 4 stuff and just some completely crazy stuff. Like, I'm just trying to keep up, to be honest, like try to grab some information together, stuff like that, and I try my best to share that knowledge with you, whatever little I have, just to put some faith in you guys. Like, I didn't achieve that much, but here's a couple things I did in the beta. So I think it's still decent, all things considered. So I have some base from what to talk about, I guess. So bear with me. I'm trying my best to share my knowledge. So, just in case that there are still some people who don't know what is a barbarian, let me let my secretary explain that to you. We can watch this awesome gameplay video and listen to what my secretary has to say about Barbarian.
Barbarian is purely melee-focused class in Diablo 4 that utilizes unique system called Arsenal, which allows you to equip up to 4 weapons, instead of the standard of 2. Barbarian has very powerful toolkit providing good tools to perform on S tier from damage reduction to gap closing and crowd controlling while also having access to massive damage.
That sounds pretty good. I think I can live with that. Sounds like a good class. So, the elephant in the room. The biggest problem that people mention when they talk about Barbarian. The early game leveling process. I have a solution for you. Just do what I did and you will not have any problems. And this is what I did. So, I started with Frenzy. I followed it up with Upheaval because Upheaval has nice AoE damage. And it has a perk that scales very well with Frenzy together, like every time you hit with Frenzy, your Upheaval gets charges and then you do more damage. And moving forward, you take Rallying Cry because in the early game you don't have that precious mount, you need to run around. And this will help you a lot. It will also help you get Fury for your Upheaval. Moving forward, Warcry, for the same reasons, it gives you Berserking. Berserking gives you movement speed, that is so good in the early game, especially because you don't have that mount. And it also gives you damage, and then it gives you more damage if there is more enemies. So Warcry is just so good. Death Blow is gonna carry your ass for a long time at the beginning, I think. It's very good clearing up the trash, and it just makes the gameplay much more smooth. And for your ultimate, doesn't really matter, you don't even need it, I think, at level 25. It's not that big of a deal, but if you want, you can take Call of the Ancients or any other really. But with this setup, I had zero issues playing the Barbarian early game. I have no idea why people are saying like it was so bad. And yes, I tried Sorcerer, and yes, Sorcerer is OP, Chain Lightning is OP, Hydra is OP, but I think with this build, I had no issues playing the Barbarian early game. I have no complaints at all. I had fun, unlike some people. But yeah, this is just one example how to play Barbarian early game. So you can always do whatever you want, and it will be just as good. Like it doesn't matter if you don't play like this. Except do not play Hammer of the Ancients or Whirlwind in the early game. And why? Because they do 17 damage, and you don't want to do that. Don't get me wrong, they are both amazing in the later stages of the game, but in the early game, 17 damage, I promise.
Due to technical issues, we were unable to play the annoying sound effect for the third time. Apologies.
In Diablo 4, power comes from items. We have these things called aspects that give you big power-ups, and people are worried that because of that, maybe they don't get the drops, maybe they don't find the right aspects, it takes too long, their progress is getting gatekept or something like that. And we have a workaround for that in Diablo 4. We have this thing called Codex. Codex allows us to gather the same powers, or some of them at least, from dungeons, and we can get the aspects to our codex, and from our codex we can put them to items. So for Barbarian, so far we know about these ones. Where did I put it? Oh no, here. So this is the list of useful damage enabling aspects that I found that should be in the codex. Some of them even have locations for them, which is, I sure hope they're gonna change that, because that's where people are gonna go the first thing that the game launches. They ain't gonna be doing main quests, they're gonna go straight to these dungeons. And I think that's what you should try to do anyway, find the good aspect dungeons. But moving on. So I think barbarians are just fine. They are not gonna get gatekept by not finding legendary powers because of this codex system. So no need to be worried about that. As barbarians, as mentioned before, we have the arsenal system. So I'm gonna let my secretary take care of this one again. I'm gonna just put you a picture here. It's gonna showcase some weapons, and then we are gonna listen how the arsenal system is going to work.
Barbarian Arsenal System provides you with all of the bonuses that you have on any of your 4 weapons, regardless of which weapon you are using. This means that even if you have weapons that you don't use at all, they are not irrelevant. This also means that if you are not using those weapons, you don't need to worry about how good weapon damage they have, but can just choose the one with best affixes for your build.
So, that's about it. In other words, this means that we might just want to use weapon like the axe. And maybe 3 of these, because we have the 4 weapons. and we just want to get the best buff possible, and because I think that barbarians are going to do a little bit more than 17 damage, so I feel confident choosing weapon like the axe to do more damage to healthy enemies so I can slay them in one strike instead of having them crawling around in agony. But don't worry, if you're some kind of twisted maniac who wants to slash their enemies 10 times before they get to rest in pieces, we have just the perfect tools for you as well. Just pick sword instead of axes. Swords have critical strike damage, they won't be killing anything in one hit, and you get to torment your enemies to the maximum while watching your life spin away in front of your very own eyes. So we now know that the axe has the amazing affix that gives you damage to healthy. But how exactly does the affixes work? So here we have a weapon with affixes, and let's listen how it works.
Affixes listed as plus 15% damage are additive, meaning that they don't mean straight up 15% increase in damage. Affixes with 15% damage, however, directly multiply your damage by that much.
Okay, so if it has a plus in front of it, if it's an additive one, and it's not as good as the multiplier ones that does not have the plus in front of it. So what does this mean? This means that for us to do big damage, we need to get as many as possible of these multipliers. And at this time, it is unknown how the additive ones get summed together. Are they like separate multipliers by the name, or do they all get summed up together in one clump? Like, this is unknown at this moment. What I do know about affixes, however, is that not all of the affixes are equal. Like these two here, they both give 15% damage. You already know that the other is always in the close enemy and the other needs you to stun. You might think that your build is always stunning before you do your big damage. So what's the problem here? Well, the problem here is that all the bosses in the game are immune to crowd control. So any slowed or any damage to stun or any crowd control affix, anything like that, they all go to garbage bin when you're fighting a boss. So keep that in mind when you're building a character. Try to avoid these kind of affixes that don't work on bosses, because that's where the damage should be working. You know, those are the ones with most health, so you want the most damage. But yeah, with that in mind, I put together a list that I think that should be good enough, at least at the beginning of the game. These are the ones that you should be looking for. So I'm gonna just lean back and let my secretary read this to you.
List of affixes that I recommend prioritizing on gear. 1. Plus X% damage to close enemies. 2. Plus X% core skill damage. 3. Plus X% damage to vulnerable or berserker damage. 4. Plus X% critical hit damage or critical hit chance. 5. Flex, maybe STR, depend on scaling.
Yep. I think with these ones you will be pretty safe. They should always work on the bosses so you're not missing the damage when it matters. So these are some multipliers Barbarian class has built in our skill tree. Berserking is kind of passive thing we have that is triggered by some skills. It gives you 25% increased stamina and 15% increased movement speed. Warcry is a shout that gives you 15 or 30% damage if there is more enemies, and you can level it up and the number goes up as well. Then we have few skills that can trigger vulnerable. Vulnerable is flat 20% increase in damage, but you can actually get affixes that boost that. And then there's a couple ninja nodes, like using two-handed weapons gives you multiplier, or like probably gonna be in the Paragon tree, so you should definitely keep eye out for those. And since multipliers is the main way of getting more damage in Diablo 4, I think you should try to get all of these if possible in your build, because big numbers.
Fortify is a unique barbarian mechanic where you stack fortification over your health bar. When you have more fortification than your life, You become fortified and get 10% damage reduction. When taking damage while fortified, both your health and your Fortify will be reduced by that amount. Fortify is not only static passive but has interactions with aspects etc.
Oh, wow, wow. Okay, I'm getting really tired. This video is taking forever, but we can push through it. We can do it, boys.
Barbarian has base chance of 3% to overpower. The currently no methods to force this is to use bash basic skill or to have an aspect for 10 stacks of weapon swaps. Overpower is your HP plus Fortify multiplied by skill scaling, added on top of your damage as separate source of damage. So with 500 health plus 500 Fortify and 56% base scaling for skill, that would mean 560 overpower damage.
Well, there you have it. Overpowering in the beta. At the beginning of the beta, it was people like it more, I would say. People like it more at the beginning of the beta. When we started hitting over 300,000, it started to feel like it was too cumbersome to use, and I don't think many people kept using it anymore at that point. Um, I hope in the launch we will have some other more reasonable methods of triggering overpower for Barbarian, and maybe we'll then see more usage of it. And I think in the mid game it might still be very useful, especially if you get that legendary very early that gives you overpower from the weapon swaps, or if you want to play with bash, which I don't recommend, but if you want to do that, then overpower will be a good source of damage in the mid game, I think, and I hope it will get better to use in the late game. Barbarians also have this Arsenal passive weapon mastery system that works so that whatever weapon you are using, you are gaining mastery on it, and by using some weapon, you are gonna get passive effects from that weapon's mastery. And in the beta, we had like, I don't know, half of it or something like that, because we had part of it locked behind a quest. So but for example, if you use two-handed sword, you gain a mastery passive that causes bleed on your enemies. By whatever attack you do, you always bleed your enemies. Stuff like that. Very useful. So, I think we finally know everything about doing damage with Barbarian. There's not much more I can tell you about it. But one more thing, like, how do we calculate how much damage we do? If you care about that, I mean. Maybe our secretary could explain that to us.
Sure, I will try my best to explain to you puny humans how to calculate damage. Damage is calculated by multiplying your weapon damage with your skill scaling, which for upheaval would be 70% of your weapon damage. This will represent our base damage. Now for each multiplier we have active, we will multiply the result again and again, until we run out of multipliers. The final number will be your damage.
Okay, simple enough, simple enough. So I did some napkin math about what I think was the max hit on the beta, give or take couple 100 billion trillions of calculation errors, but yeah. Anyway, here you can see it, and now it's gone because I don't think 99% of you want to read that, and we can just move on. So you guys must be even more tired of this video than I am, so I'm gonna wrap things up now. Just gonna drop a couple more tips about how to smooth your
Warning.
launch and
Speculative tips incoming.
oh come on, and how to, yeah, I hope it helps to smooth your launch. So as I said earlier, I think at the launch you should go hunt for those dungeon aspects, the first thing you do. I don't think the main quest offers that much of a progression at least, and we can always come back to it when we get a couple of those aspects running, and we will have much better time. So I also heard that Mount could be level 36 quest, so I don't think it's worth to wait that long to go for dungeoning. So So the last thing I'm gonna talk about is gambling and how to gamble in Diablo 4. You go to these events that is playing here in the background, and you then finish them, you get rewarded obos, and with obos you can go to villages or cities and find this special merchant that lets you gamble. And The thing with Barbarian gambling is, I don't know if it's true for other classes, but for Barbarians, we can roll our best damage aspects in gloves, and gloves are almost 3 times cheaper than two-handed weapon, for example, but yet they still roll the same aspects just as well. Like, yeah, just spam those gloves and you will be a happy barbarian. Okay, we made it. It was a long journey. If you're still here, give yourself upload. You deserve it. And if you have any questions, I will try to answer them all at the comments. And thank you for watching. It has been my pleasure. And see you at launch.